And greetings. Happy Friday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on BlazeTV, radio and podcast. I'm back here inside the comfy confines. Bit of a different scene driving into the studio today. I'm Steve Deace. Little wintry desolation compared to all the cacti and palm trees I've seen the rest of the week, but I'm not here to complain. I got some sun. I got plenty of green. I'm good. You know.
You just used the word desolation and said you weren't complaining.
That's an accurate description, is it not, Todd Erzin?
January in Iowa.
And January in Iowa is, frankly, desolation. That's essentially what it is. Complete and total wintry desolation. That's what it is. Auron MacIntyre, how are you? Since Todd's already complaining, I'll just ignore him. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Todd is complaining about my complaining.
No.
All right, can't do that.
You just did not solve the Kobayashi murder.
Yes, I did.
You didn't do that.
There is one person paid to complain around here, and I have already hired myself for said position. So thank you for that.
Only a true friend would be that truly honest.
Indeed. We will be joined by our colleague, Auron MacIntyre, here for the Deace Group in just a few moments. We're brought to you by friends over at Trust and Will. And yes, you know, these are conversations that aren't fun to have, but they are necessary to have nevertheless, to make sure if the thing that none of us want to think about, death, and I checked the death rate again this morning, guess what? It remains a robust 100%. All right, so if that thing were to happen, another kind of tragedy were to happen, do you know, would your assets, would your children, the most precious thing you have, would those things and your wishes be clearly known and carried out? Make sure that is done with our friends at Trust and Will, and you probably got to update these every few years. Amy went to Trust and Will a couple of years ago, used them to update our situation, and just came away extremely impressed by how customizable, easy, flexible it was. All right, so check one of your goals off early this year with our friends at Trust and Will. Protect what matters most in minutes at trustandwill.com/Deace and get 10% off plus free shipping. That's 10% off plus free shipping at trustandwill.com/Deace. Trustandwill.com/Deace. 10% off and free shipping at trustandwill.com/Deace. All right, next hour, it'll be your turn with some Feedback Friday. But first, let's get it going with the Deace Group. And there is our colleague, Auron MacIntyre, joining us here for the weekly look at the week that was, that begins, as it always does, with Issue 1, Bleep Lord Nefarious Says.
The people in our country who are scared now. There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families. Some who fear for their lives.
I can't pee in 4% of America right now. So
you can't pee in 4% of America.
In 4% of America, it is illegal for me to use the men's restroom in government buildings.
And the people who pick our crops and clean our office buildings, who labor in poultry farms and meat packing plants, who wash the dishes after we eat in restaurants and work the night shifts in hospitals, they may not be citizens or have the proper documentation. But the vast majority of immigrants are not criminals.
I'm not going back to Haiti.
One of those threats is this illegal alien from Haiti. ICE says he's a gang member with 17 criminal convictions in recent years.
Trump, you feel me? Little Biden forever, bro. Thank Obama for everything that he did for me, bro.
Enough is enough. It will separate families. It would lead again to continued discrimination. It's shameful that my colleagues are giving in to racist fear-mongering.
ICE can now raid classrooms, and as a high school teacher, I just want to make one thing clear. If someone tries to come in my classroom and take one of my students, one of us isn't leaving the classroom. Play with me.
ICE in Chicago with my students? No, for all, I've gotten a whole bunch of messages from people like, and I'm so appreciative of you, but baby, it would never. You think I'd be scared of you trying to come up in my school? You don't think I already have a plan and a backup plan and 56 doors in the building? and 17 routes on how to get to each one, and backup on backup on backup of contacts to make sure that their parents aren't the ones showing up.
I propose putting an end to anonymity on social media. In our countries, no one can walk the streets with a mask on their face or drive a car without a license plate. No one can send packages without showing an ID or buy a hunting weapon without giving their name.
The police will be on their best behavior because we're constantly watching and recording everything that's going on. Citizens will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording and reporting everything that's going on. And it's unimpeachable. The cars have cameras on them. I think we have a squad car here someplace. But those kind of applications using AI, if we can use AI, and we're using AI to monitor the video.
Let me hear you all say, ELGSES, Eagles! We don't promise perfection. I'm so happy that I never have, especially after I couldn't spell Eagles right.
I had not seen that. Let's get to the first question. Guest gets the first crack at it. Auron MacIntyre, what was the best of the worst that you just saw?
Well, the funniest was certainly the last one. I gotta say that the Haitian gang member screaming, thanks Obama for everything you did for me. That should just be the top line just played for every Republican political commercial for the rest of history. Just play that speech, him screaming, Joe Biden's the best, Obama's the best, I hate Trump, as he gets hauled away after being an insane criminal. That's the best kind of advertising you can get.
No doubt about it. Aaron?
Yeah, that is a multi-billion-dollar soundbite right there. Yeah. It has to be. Let's go to the end there. I did this like on 3 different occasions there. We've got trannies fearing for their lives. I can't pee where I want to. Most of the illegals are chattel labor. They're all nice people. I ain't going back to Haiti.
We know. And even if that's true, we know.
And then at the end there, the Spanish, I think that was the Prime Minister of Spain saying, we need to ban anonymity online. And then Larry Ellison talking about setting up a proto version of Minority Report, and the people who would actually enforce that can't spell eagles. I got nothing.
Indeed. These are our betters, folks. These are our betters. Todd?
I'm going to have to just double down on the Haitian guy, but were it not for the last 3 days where, as Steve, you've recently said, I'm actually pointing out that we've had quite a bit of sunlight lately. I'd actually be jealous of that guy because he's being totally honest. He got way more out of Obama and Biden than we've ever gotten in our lifetime from most Republican politicians. I was just truly honest right there.
All right, let's talk. Since this was broached as political gold, let's talk about that for just a second. And you guys might remember I came in here one day during COVID with all the lockdowns and stuff, and that's when I first kind of got turned on to being bored at night and watching the actual broadcast of old sporting events on YouTube from our childhood and beforehand. It's got the commercials and everything, right? Okay, and so I'm watching some college football game from 1986. So it's the fall of 86 heading into the 86 midterms, all right? And the broadcast is coming from KTLA in California, and a guy is running for Congress, or KNBC, one of those. And a guy is running for Congress as a Republican, just talking about locking up all the illegal aliens and the drug dealers and putting murderers on death row and executing them. And to run for Congress in Southern California. Just right there on TV on a national broadcast in the number 2 television market in the country, right? Do you guys remember this? And I came in the next day and I was just like, dude, we can't get Republicans in Alabama to run ads like this. And they were running stuff like this in California in the 80s. You remember this? Right. All right. So with that as a backdrop, okay, is that soundbite also some kind of a litmus test for our own side?
That's what I'm saying.
Like, if you're not willing to see the opportunity there and glom onto that and just hit play. When all of the hand wringing and everything begins, all right, with all the deportation, play. Okay. If you're not willing to do that, isn't that in a sense kind of a self-incrimination that either you are a traitor or you're too dumb and feckless to hold said office. You're too dumb to live as a politician, basically.
For example, just spitballing here. Down in Don't Mess with Texas, Governor Greg Abbott right now in the Texas legislature.
Who are you talking about?
Yeah.
Because I'm convinced Texas does not have a governor. I am convinced of this. I mean, they must not have a governor. The office must be vacant. As its entire legislature erupts into civil war and complete ineffectiveness and backstabbing and no one knows what the agenda is or who the committee chairmen are. There must not be a governor of Texas. That position, that office must be vacant. You claim that there's even a name associated with it, I believe, correct?
Yeah, I do.
What'd you say his name was?
I believe it's Governor Greg Abbott.
Okay. Do you know who this Greg Abbott guy is, Aaron? Have you heard of him?
Never heard of Abbott.
Auron, are you familiar with this? You know what a Greg Abbott
Trump
is?
didn't even know if he was in a room or not. So maybe,
I don't know what it. But if you live in Texas, if you can verify for us that you have a governor, Steve at stevedeace.com. Anyway, Todd, finish your point.
Texans legitimately should be jealous of that Haitian. That Haitian has gotten way more than they have in the state of Don't Mess with Texas.
Isn't this, Auron, a litmus test? Kind of tells you where your Republican representative kind of is, if they're not willing to, see the benefit of said messaging?
I want to be clear. The left shot Donald Trump. Like, they shot him on live television to prevent what is happening now. Had he not been literally saved by God Almighty, we would not be seeing what we're seeing now. I don't want to hear a single word about what's beyond the pale. Oh, we don't fight like this. It's racist. I don't want to hear a word about that. We are done. We have put on the cleats. We are playing real ball at this point. Anybody who is not on board with using something like that is obviously too weak or is entirely controlled opposition. Like you said, the enemy. Mm-hmm. That is all there is to it. That is the only conclusion to draw if someone cannot pull the trigger on an ad like that.
I totally agree. Can't say it better myself, Aaron. Second?
As seconded.
Let's get to the exit question. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the odds, Trump will issue an executive order making it acceptable to say gay and retarded in polite society again. And 10 being the odds that Lindsey Graham is just gay. Rank this week's level of total depravity, Todd.
It's still pretty heinous out there, but I can in good conscience give it a 10 after the last week. I'll give it a 9.
That might be the most Catholic thing you've ever said on this show right there. That might be the most Catholic thing you have ever said right there. People are trying, so it's only a 9. People are trying. They're striving. So it's only a 9. Aaron, go ahead.
I'm still at a 10.
You're still at a 10. Auron.
I'm confused by the rating system this week because I think Trump issuing that executive order is possible at this point.
You do think it's possible?
Yeah, I think we might. Very fine executive orders, only the best at this point. So I don't know.
It's on the table.
The whole thing up.
What I want to see, I want to bring back that whiteboard meme from the first term, right? When he held it up. If he does that and holds that up. Okay.
Oh, I've already been making the meme.
Have you? Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. All right. Let's get to issue 2. Pick your favorite one.
Here is just a taste of what President Trump has done in just 1 week. He freaking mogged the World Economic Forum, released the JFK, RFK, and MLK assassination files, fired a bunch of woke DEI stooges in the federal government, designated the cartels as terrorist organizations, authorized immigration and customs enforcement to remove illegal aliens, revoked security clearances for shady U.S. officials, withdrew the United States from the World Health Organization, pardoned J6ers and other political prisoners, pardoned pro-lifers who were thrown in prison under the FACE Act, and started the battle against the wrong interpretation of the 14th Amendment and birthright citizenship, and like dozens of other really, really good things. He's flooded every zone, and every lefty's head is spinning.
By the way, I want to say something here. I posted last night on X, because you brought it up a few minutes ago, Ron. In all seriousness, I really hope he has, the president, closely vetted this Sean Curran. I don't know anything about Sean Curran. Never heard the name in my life till he just got appointed head of the Secret Service.
Okay. Well, he was in the photo. He was in the iconic photo.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Yes.
All right. I just didn't know that. Okay. Thank you, Aaron. But I really hope that a thorough vetting of who's going to run that and who's going to make the on-the-ground decisions within that enterprise. I hope they have actually more thoroughly vetted that than any of the rest of these appointments or orders, because of what you just said there, Aaron. You know, I agree with the Tucker position that J.D. Vance was meant to be assassination insurance, essentially. But you do come to a point where you are these forces in the world where he is just nut punching you from so many angles and all at once, that you just ultimately decide, you know what, we'll just take our chances with the young and experienced senator and see if he's able to pull this off and go from not even finishing a term as a senator to running the entire United States government. So I really hope that his security detail and the Secret Service apparatus there is absolutely on lockdown. It was more vetted than anything else they've done. Just wanted to throw that out there. Let's get to the first question. Todd, I'll start with you. Pick your favorite Trump executive order / action thus far. Tell us why you picked it.
Well, this is a smorgasbord, and it's like asking me to choose amongst my children here.
Yes.
I love them all dearly. But I've got to go with the gender one. Obviously, this is very personal to me and my family, and the work that we put in on this and the cost that we have bared on this front. It's been significant. The language going further than any of us thought, as Aaron pointed out in his montage when he brought this up, it actually talks about gender defined at conception. That's amazing. And furthermore, as I've said before, this is the primordially speaking, going back to the very beginning. They're taking care of the border, how multifaceted this is. But if we can't get gender right, we can't get reality.
Talk about litmus tests.
We can't get reality right.
If you're right. I mean, one of the smartest things you ever said on our show is, you said this, 4, 5, 6 years ago, that once we fall, if we fall for the tranny stuff, once we abandon that, we inevitably are going to fall for anything. I think it was actually right before COVID happened. You said that.
Oh, yes.
And because it's a basic understanding, not even understanding, willingness to acknowledge reality. I think we all understand. Right. I mean, I think even the tranny teacher with the blue-dyed hair and the 64 nose rings understands that's why she's acting out the way that she is. She's at war with reality. Yes. She's at war within her own sanity and within her own God-given conscience. She carries still the imago Dei. She's trying to suppress it. She's trying to bury it. But that mark of divinity is still there. Okay, that impresario is still there, and she's at war with it. That's what's causing all of the angst and the PTSD and the acting out. Right. Okay. And if we're so far gone that it's not even the denial of reality, that's terrible enough. But we all know. And yet we're not willing to say and acknowledge. That's way more heinous and way more dangerous. And I think that's probably what you were alluding to.
If you can't get that right, you'll never tamp down the border or any other issue that needs to be taken care of.
Because if you don't have the basic courage to state what is the most obvious fact of biology, the first biological fact stated about every human being ever is what? It's a boy, it's a girl. It's the first biological fact. And it's funny, this is all happening the last few years at the same time. A whole new trend, gender reveal parties, which never existed when you and I were having kids, or our parents were having us, or their parents were having them, or their parents were having them. Right. Just there was no concept of this, which I don't have necessarily a problem with it, but I find it fascinating that this is a trend that is surging at the same time we're trying to deny that there is even is such a thing, right? Auron, what do you think? What's your favorite?
Well, I think a sleeper might be the declassification of the MLK files, if only that it will finally let conservatives know that Martin Luther King Jr. was a plagiar, someone who wanted affirmative action, wanted racial quotas, pushed for income redistribution, and held orgies in which he cheated on his wife several times and fathered children outside of his marriage. If Chris Rufo was around today, he would have gotten MLK fired. However, that said, the most important one, without question, is absolutely the change to birthright citizenship. this is a massive shift for the future of the country. This was never what the 14th Amendment was intended to say. It has been an absolute abuse of the American system in order to keep it this way. And the fact that Trump is touching this imagine Mitt Romney or George Bush talking about this, much less taking action on it. It is a sea change, because it not only wins now, but it also makes sure that we don't have a large amount of immigrants brought in through this anchor baby system, which automatically become Democratic voters when they turn 18. This is one of those wins that makes wins in the future easier, and that ultimately is incredibly important.
I think you make a strong case for that one, Auron, in that this is a multi-generational battle that he inherited. Unlike even the gender stuff is even relatively recent. I mean, this was just beginning to become a thing at the tail end of Trump's first presidency. But what you're touching on is something that has been, you go back, you take that and apply it to Plyler versus Doe, which is what gave illegal aliens access to taxpayer-funded programs and benefits. This is a multi-generational issue that has led us here. Maybe the biggest fight that a Republican has taken on directly. I mean, you can say Trump took on the big fight indirectly of Roe v. Wade by appointing the justices, but it's not like he signed into law the legislation that caused it to be reconsidered. He just appointed the justices that reconsidered it. In this case, he is specifically picking a multi-generational fight. And I think it's really important for our audience to understand when people on our side say birthright citizenship was never meant to say whoever is born here automatically becomes a citizen, or what's known as an anchor baby, they're right. So if you go back to the original ratification of the 14th Amendment, first of all, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, they were all ratified together as a package. All right. And they were ratified. They were called the Reconstruction Amendments. They were ratified together as a package because they were specifically put together to counter and try to anticipate how Confederate states, Southern states with the Union back and put back together would attempt on a state level to circumvent the newly freed Black America. And so when the language of the 14th Amendment specifically mirrors the language of the 5th Amendment on purpose, because it's a restating that this now applies to states as well. The state, because they were concerned that the state of Alabama, for example, would say, well, we never considered Black people that were slaves to be citizens. Therefore, their children, even though they're born here, are not citizens. The key phrase in the version that's in the language of the version of the language in the 14th Amendment is the phrase subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That's in the very first sentence. Subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Why? Because the meaning of this was to say to a former Confederate state like Alabama, we brought these slaves here under the jurisdiction of the United States government. We brought them here. We regulated them. So they were here under the auspices and jurisdiction of the U.S. government. Therefore, their children who were born on our soil, since they were here under our jurisdiction, therefore they are citizens. Now, when they were going through the ratification process of this particular amendment in the Senate, the senator who wrote the 15th Amendment was Senator Jacob Howard of Michigan. When he testified before the full Senate on the ratification of this, it's right there in the Senate record. I even retweeted someone who sent me a copy of it on X just a few minutes ago before we went on the air. He stated specifically this was not meant to mean foreigners, anyone who came here, dropped a kid, it was an American citizen. There's a reason why when the UN ambassador to France takes his wife over to New York City's hospitals to have a kid, that kid is not an American citizen, but a French citizen. Why? Because he's not here under the jurisdiction of the United States, is he? No, he's here under the jurisdiction of the government of France. So he's French. If you are an illegal alien by nature, by definition, you are not here under the jurisdiction of the United States. Otherwise, you wouldn't be an illegal alien. That is what makes you the very essence of an illegal alien. You are not under the jurisdiction of the United States. In fact, you've violated it. So therefore, neither you nor your descendants, otherwise, instead of sending the Zimmerman note to Mexico, why didn't the Germans just, have a bunch of their people just, hop over the Rio Grande and start dropping kids and claim they were American citizens? That's not how it works. And that's not how anyone thought it was going to work until just this last generation. And it has undone us as a people on multiple levels. I've mentioned this before. One of the most revolutionary things I ever heard when I was a consumer of this content before I came to work in this industry was listening to Mark Levin one day, and he said, we're not a nation of immigrants, we're a nation of citizens. And man, my mind exploded when I heard that. When I'm just contemplating the fullness of the measure of what that means.
But
okay?
because we're a nation of very fat, dumb, and lazy citizens,
Correct.
we believe nonsense
Correct.
like this.
Correct. Anyway, I'll stop now. We could do an entire show on this, but that's just kind of the Reader's Digest version. Aaron, what's your favorite?
The rescission of Lyndon Johnson's executive order, which basically established affirmative action. I mean, talk about shifting the Overton window. Say what you want to about the origins of that executive order to the extent that we needed something during that time in our country to preserve e pluribus unum. That can be debated all you want. But my pastor, not in this context, but another one, dropped a great line the other day. He said, a tree doesn't tell you what its fruit is. A fruit tells you what the tree is. And boy, howdy, the fruit of that has been, at best, a grift for the likes of Al Sharpton and others. And at worst, what we're seeing with just abjectly, overtly racist DEI practices. So I thought we were like maybe 20 years away from like shifting the Overton window on that. Week 1.
Good stuff. Let's get to the exit question. Name the Trump executive order / action you think is most likely to fail or be regretted in some way, shape, or form. Let me give you an example. All right. Don't know Mike Pompeo, met him once, not the biggest fan in the world, okay? On the surface, rescinding his security detail, I don't care. But if he gets assassinated by some kind of Iranian terrorist, that's going to blow back, obviously, on Trump in the administration. That's kind of an example of what I'm talking about. What is something that you're concerned the juice isn't worth the squeeze and they might regret later on? Auron, I'll start with you.
Well, I didn't understand the regret part of it. I thought just it was the one most likely to fail.
You can use it from that context, too, if you want to do it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, in that case, unfortunately, I would also give the same answer that I gave, which is the birthright citizenship one. It's got a very long road to hoe. It's got to make it through a lot of court cases, and I am worried that the Supreme Court, while better than it's ever been, still has a number of members that are pretty weak in the knees on this. The real problem is that the 14th Amendment, while, as you point out, is important for defending the citizenship of freed blacks at that time, was written very poorly and has actually had many disastrous effects, including basically nullifying the 10th Amendment through the incorporation.
Oh, it's what they used to they use that to undo marriage and everything else. Yes, exactly.
Yes, right. So the language of it is very loose and allows you to basically do whatever you want with it, which is why it's just run rampant across. In many ways, you could say the U.S. Constitution post the 14th Amendment is a radically different document. And so while I hope, and I think it's incredibly important that we do this correctly, that we understand American citizenship correctly, I think that is a very tall mountain to climb, not just legally, but also selling that to the American people who have been hit with this propaganda for an entire generation. I hope they're up for the battle, but it will be one of their most significant ones.
All right. Todd?
Long term, it might be some of the DEI stuff because it's about follow through. And the teachers in Aaron's montage, they're no less terrorists, quite frankly, than the Haitian dude. They're going to test us, and we're going to have to arrest some of them. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there's any doubt about that.
I don't disagree with that either. Aaron?
Yeah, I was going to say the 14th Amendment thing, absolutely necessary, though. I struggle to find one that I would definitely say, oh, they might regret that later. I really do.
Nobody wants to jump on if some Iranian terrorist assassinates Mike Pompeo, they might regret that later.
Since you already mentioned that, I figured that was a given.
Okay, because I mean that's all my Twitter feed was last night. I guess I found out I found out every friend Mike Pompeo has ever had on the right because they all basically tweeted what I just said. All right, we'll come back, and when we do, where are the Democrats at? What's the plan over there? Let's discuss next. So I know we are ecstatic, many of us are, about the results of the last election and the results we're already seeing since that last election was put into office. But there's still going to be a lot of uncertainty in the world. A lot of the various forces that are at play here are not just going to sit there and say, yeah, keep kicking our ass, and we have no response. So, there's going to be some yin and yang. You want to go after our trade partners with tariffs because of their imbalance. Fine. Don't be shocked if they decide to counter some of that action, particularly in the case of China. There's going to be tax cuts. There's going to be regulation changes. So learn why, despite all of those variables, gold remains a viable diversification tactic now more than ever. And use Birch Gold and their ultimate guide for gold in the Trump era with a foreword from Donald Trump Jr. himself. To get your free copy, along with Birch Gold's free information kit on gold, just text my name, Steve, to 989-898. Here's the facts. National debt continues to increase. Our interest payments on the debt continue to increase. Gold is still an effective hedge against a weakened dollar. And that's why you want to trust Birch Gold with an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau, countless 5-star reviews, thousands of happy customers, and you can become one of them right now. Get started by texting Steve to 989-898. Text Steve to 989-898 for your free info kit on gold. It's the ultimate guide for gold in the Trump era with the forward from Don Jr. himself. Again, text my name, Steve, to the number 989-898. Let's welcome back in our colleague here, Auron MacIntyre. We'll just talk about you as if you're not here yet, Auron. We should clarify, has he been on enough to be in the Sarah Gonzalez, Daniel Horowitz class of friend and colleague, or is it still just colleague? I need a point of order on this, Todd and Aaron.
Oh, friend and colleague.
You're okay with that?
Right. Absolutely.
Aaron, you okay with that?
There is no better beneficiary of his intellect than I am because of the confusion that people have. So people think I'm a lot smarter than I actually am.
So
I still get your mail at this point.
That doesn't mean he has to accept, right? Okay, it's like Don Jr. said. I mean, Fauci doesn't have to accept the pardon; he can reject it. Okay, doesn't have to accept the distinction. But I just want to get that point of order. All right, so let's get to issue 3. The empire always strikes back, but how?
So far, the left has had no new material to throw at the new Trump administration. On Inauguration Day, they tried the old call everybody you don't like a Nazi move with Elon Musk. Later in the week, the squad went into histrionics over the Laken-Riley Act, which would facilitate the deportation of illegals who commit theft. There are federal courts in the 666th District of Babylon who are already trying to put the kibosh on some of Trump's executive orders. And of course, the nation was exposed to a witch priestess at the National Cathedral spewing demonic garbage, but that's not new. So far this week, the left has been a big yawn.
So, I mean, I even saw that the talking points went out with the deportations. The cost of your goods and services are about to go up because we don't have the human chattel labor. But I don't know if you guys, I felt it reading all of their statements on X and press releases. Like it just seemed like their heart wasn't in it as I was reading it. Like it didn't be like, oh no, here we go again. It was just, I just was like, I rolled my eyes, actually. I was just kind of like, that's all we have here? All right, so how and when will the Democrats respond to the barrage that Trump has unleashed on them here this week? Todd, I'll start with you.
I predicted this on multiple occasions as it applied to the previous election, and I was incorrect about it, but it still seems so logical as a place that they would default to based on things we saw in Aaron's montage. How about at some point, especially with this DEI stuff, a national teacher strike? Because again, dealing with that, once all of this is the people are excited about what's going on right now, but a lot of people on the right too. This is, what am I supposed to do with my kids all day long?
All right, let's play that one out then. Why haven't they done it yet?
Well, Scott Glenn, as I said earlier, hard part about playing chicken is no one to flinch. It is a high-risk endeavor.
Because right now, Trump is sitting at about a 54% approval rating. It's been 1 week, and this is likely to reverberate back on you as the teachers' unions, as you're on brand for what your opponents have been telling us all along that you are, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So maybe the moment isn't right, but maybe they might find a moment later on that they think might be.
Yeah, and I don't try to think too tactically about who they are because they're an utterly broken people. I think it's going to be something drastic one way or the other. They're not just going to like pivot back and forth and just really try to triangulate. That's not who they are. They're incapable of being that.
Okay, that's an option. Auron, what do you think? What are they hatching over there?
They feel incredibly weak. It's amazing. They tried to do the Nazi thing with Elon, and the ADL came out and said, "Sit down, he's fine." That's amazing. They also tried to do kind of this, oh, well, you're not being very Christian, which is hilarious because they spent the entire campaign talking about how Trump was bringing in Christian nationalism. Right. And now the main concern is he's just not Christian enough. So they're pretty much 0-2 right now. I would guess their most effective line of attack could be going back to class warfare. Mm-hmm. We know that they've already been pushing the oligarch line, right? We've got look at all these guys standing behind Trump. They're all the oligarchs. Now, don't pay attention to the fact that Zuckerberg and Bezos were on the Democrat side 5 minutes ago. But that could be effective rhetoric if we do not fix the economy. And I got to be honest, Trump continues to say, basically, we're going to keep the money printers on. That means inflation's going to continue. It'll keep Wall Street happy. It'll help out rich people, but it's going to keep punishing the average person. They're not going to see that adjusted cost of living. I'm also seeing a lot of tone deafness, even from people I really respect, on the state of the economy from, some guys like Elon and Vivek and even Chris Rufo. And that's not great. The Republican Party needs to prepare for that angle of attack, because I think if living conditions for the average person remain the same or continue to decline, then the class warfare pivot away from wokeness could be successful.
I think I like your analysis a lot, because to me, I view what happened in Florida for the last few years as a test tube for what's happening right now nationally. Okay. And ultimately in that case, you had a governor who violated the Andrew Breitbart saying that politics flows downstream from culture by governing way to the right of where the culture was. And when the culture, by and large, saw it was effective and they were better off for it, then moved to the right. Okay. See, I agree that politics flows downstream from culture on the right because we don't have a lot of great leaders. Okay. So we have to terraform culture for years or decades to get, to take any ground whatsoever. We're on their side. They can just do Thanos snaps, and Barack Obama's for gay marriage now. And all of a sudden there's a gay character, and he's always the smartest, most well-adjusted one on every show in America the very next season. And every commercial at the next 5 Super Bowls, everyone's gay. Okay. On our side, it doesn't work that way. All right. And so there's going to be a ratio here. Right? If Trump wants to have a knockdown, drag out fight over immigration and the border and birthright citizenship and all these other things, people will go for it, provided it doesn't hurt their pocketbook or bottom line. All right. The GOP consultant analysis that, well, people don't want a culture war, so we have to be a bunch of feckless corporatists and that's all we can be for, is dead wrong. There's a ratio, though. Ultimately, if it gets in the way, you be as pro-life as you want. You can say gay and retard as much as you want. Deport as many people as you want. All right. You can bounce as many trannies as you want to do. Okay. You can retroactively go after as many COVID robber barons as you want. Okay. And fiends. Fine. But the minute that it if my kitchen table needs are not being met, then I will listen to the Democrat messaging that this stuff is getting in the way of what's best for me. And when Ron DeSantis demonstrated that he could do both at the same time, you saw what it did to the Democratic Party in Florida. They're reduced to ash. They are a letterhead. They do not exist by and large as just a letterhead and an address. Okay. And now the big concern is a bunch of Democrats are becoming Republicans that you're all going to want to primary out of there probably in about 10 minutes in Florida, trying to get off a sinking ship. Something akin to that. Now, the balkanization is too prevalent nationally, but something akin to that could be done here if Trump is able to accomplish both of them. because you're seeing they're left without a message. Auron, what you just said is for the first time in decades, the Democratic Party has to wait to see if our side fails before it knows what its talking points are.
That's true.
We've never seen that. At least not. I've worked in this business for 19 years. That's never been the case. In fact, our entire industry gets more clicks for The View than The View gets themselves by hate responding to them. We've always been a reaction to them setting the agenda. And so if he governs effectively, if he can manifest effectively the agenda that he's boldly laying out, it will similarly devastate them, I think, across the country. What do you think, Aaron?
So I want to reset something that I said in the aftermath, I think a couple weeks after the election, which is that the modern American left, yes, I believe that they are spiritually inspired by Lucifer, but they are still human beings nonetheless. They're still human beings nonetheless. Human beings get tired, they get bored, they get exhausted. And I think you've seen that over the last few months from the American left. And isn't it interesting that finally, after 10 years of characterizing Donald Trump for things that maybe in the previous administration he didn't live up to, he is finally living up to, and then some in spades, their characterization of him right at the time when they're out of energy and are exhausted. Mm-hmm. So what do they do going forward? I think this splintering is going to continue for the time being, barring any self-inflicted wounds from the Trump administration. And so far, it's been really buttoned up. We're getting down to details here that are really impressive. And I just wanted, I think this is going to be a foreshadowing of what the 2028, I should say, Democrat primary is going to look like. Because they are basically wholly owned. They have a large portion of their base that is nowhere near the mainstream of America that they have to contend with. Yep. So they're going to be fighting over these messages as well. Yep. Yeah, the oligarchy thing might be effective, but is that going to be sufficient for the most left-wing ideologues? So I don't know. I'm not trying to be Pollyanna. That's not my MO anyway. I'm really uncomfortable being optimistic. I've been that this week, but I don't see any signs of this on the left tampering down anytime soon. So I'm just going to go with the oldest trick in the book, chaos in the streets. Maybe that's going to be their next big play somehow, some way.
Exit question, really quick. Give me a name. Predict who emerges this year as the face of Democrat opposition. Todd.
The bishop of the church, the National Cathedral there in Washington.
Oh, the witch
DC.
lady?
Yeah.
I mean, she made the rounds yesterday, that's for sure. Auron.
I think it's going to be AOC. I think they wanted to tack back to the center a little bit with someone like Shapiro or Gavin Newsom, but Newsom is just ruined by California at this point. And I think AOC's coalition really is the inheritor of the left at this point.
What do you think, Aaron?
I want to say somebody like Josh Shapiro, but I haven't seen much of him. So, yeah, again, like I was just saying, somebody like AOC is probably going to be maybe Hakeem Jeffries, but they don't know what their message is by and large over there. They're not in unanimity at the moment.
All right, let's do a very quick kicker topic on issue 4. If you could force Trump to issue an executive order he has not, what would it be, Aaron?
I'm totally ripping off this guy right here, and I'm saying the old NRO staff, the old National Review staff, the old NR staff. Let's just deport them all. I'm done. I'm done listening to National Review types.
All right. Auron, what would you have him do?
I would say ending immigration moratorium. I know that's probably not coming, but yeah, I think we need to go even further, even though he's doing amazing work on that.
Todd.
Finally clearing up this whole platform versus publisher thing.
On social media.
Yeah. Put some teeth on it.
All right, let's get to our predictions, since I think we all know what Aaron's is going to be. Yep. Let's just get it out of the way. Go ahead, Aaron, first.
Hey, the Aaron curse is 2 for 2 the last 2 weeks. These are good predictions if they're done for the right reason. So the Chiefs are going to get absolutely blown out on Sunday evening in the AFC Championship. I mean, it's just going to be an embarrassment to be a Chiefs fan.
Todd, your thoughts?
I don't care.
Auron, your prediction?
My prediction is that the AI battle inside the administration is actually going to be far more important than people realize, and that the attempt to kind of manufacture AI and dedicate a vast amount of resources to AI in kind of the America versus China showdown will become a defining factor in the next 50 years.
I don't disagree with that. I mean, you can just sub out Operation Warp Speed for Stargate, essentially, and the same forces are aligned for and against on our side. It's for the same exact. Yep, you're right.
Yeah, this is digital gain of function research.
Yeah, very well put. Very well put, Todd.
Naturally, the dream came true, the 12-team college football playoff, and instantly after the first time, it wasn't Nirvana. It didn't tickle everybody where they wanted it to. And so obviously, instead of fixing it, they're going to turn it into a 16-team playoff because they understand absolutely nothing. Nothing about this makes you smarter or more ethical ever.
So I'm criticized for my so-called lame predictions, and Todd has made this prediction no fewer than like 12 times.
Okay, so first of all, Todd cannot make this prediction again. That's a ruling here from the guy whose name is on the show, because you're right. He has made this prediction a million times. But secondly, the difference is you're just doing this you're using the prediction segment for your own emotional hedging as a fan. It's reductionism.
No, I really believe that the Chiefs are going to get blown out on Sunday night.
No, you don't.
I absolutely do.
No, you don't.
I don't know what an emotional dredge. What is this that you speak of?
Exactly.
See,
in fairness, Todd is using his to grind an axe that, frankly, a lot of people agree with. All right, but in this case, you're just using it as an emotional hedge, completely for your own purposes.
No,
I'm attaching it to real news. Everything I said really happened.
And it'll be 14 teams, by the way, Todd. I don't think they'll do 16. All right, let's get to my prediction. I think the Trump administration is going to tell us that the mysterious fleets of drones are Chinese technology that a weak Biden administration did not want to own up to because it didn't want to have to be compelled to respond in any way if it did. And I think that's what we'll be told. I think there'll be some truth to it. Whether it'll be completely true, I don't know. But I think that's the narrative I think will be given. Because I think that on some level, at least rhetorically, Trump wants to have this fight. And on no level whatsoever, rhetorically or otherwise, did Biden want to have it. So I think that's what they're going to say about the drones. And relatively soon, I think. Any thoughts on that before we get out of here in 30 seconds?
That's as likely as anything else, I think.
All right. Auron, you have anything left here in the last 20 seconds? We'll give it to you.
No, I think that the prediction's entirely possible, but, yeah, that's about all I've got on that.
Your thoughts on whether or not the Chiefs will get blown out by the Bills on Sunday? Aaron's emotional hedge.
Not an emotional hedge.
It's an emotional hedge.
Maybe criticizing people about emotional hedges is like...
That's why I recognize what an emotional hedge is. I live by them. That's why I know. Auron, good to see you, brother. Thank you.
Good seeing you guys.
You bet. We'll come back. It'll be hour 2. Feedback Friday. It'll be your turn. Stay tuned. All right, back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast with Todd Erzin and Auron MacIntyre. I'm Steve Deace. Let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. You can do that by emailing the show, steve@stevedeace.com, DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok. And then finally, if you don't mind, if you love the podcast, declare it. Let all the world know. Leave us a 5-star review on the podcast platform of your preference. Thanks to all of you that have done that already and previously. Maybe try doing it again. I don't know if you can do that or not, but give it a shot. Also, hit subscribe and then follow on iTunes so that you know every time we do a new episode, it shows up in your feed right there every single time. And this part of the show, Feedback Friday, is brought to you by our friends over at Angel Pictures. Their brand new film, Brave the Dark, in theaters this weekend. Had a chance to watch the screener of it last night. Very well acted. Kind of a Good Will Hunting type of story. Just not nearly as much swearing. But very well acted. I love a good redemption story based on a true story as well. Brave the Dark is in theaters right now from the studio that brought you Sound of Freedom. It's the inspiring true story of a troubled teen struggling to survive in a world that has let him down. He's haunted by some torturous childhood memories. Nate Williams finds himself engulfed in darkness. Thankfully, his drama teacher, Mr. Dean, He wants to come to his rescue and give him a shot. You don't want to miss out on this. I encourage you to see it. It's in theaters now. Get your tickets today at angel.com/Steve. This powerful film will leave you uplifted and inspired at angel.com/Steve. That's angel.com/Steve. All right. Are we ready for some Feedback Friday?
Let's go.
All right. Mark Lopez writes, over the weekend, wife of disgraceful former Army Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, otherwise known as the witness or whistleblower to the Trump-Zelensky phone call hoax, lamented how her husband wasn't named for receiving a preemptive pardon from Biden, which to me is an admission of guilt on his part of seditious behavior, being insubordinate to a commander-in-chief by perpetuating a lie. I'd love to see him recalled to active duty, to stand trial under general court-martial, reduction of rank, forfeiture of pay, dishonorable discharge, and sentenced to hard labor in Leavenworth military prison. And line General Milley right up there next to him for treason, admitting he'd called the Chinese military with advance warning of an incoming American attack under Trump. Well, the latter got a pardon. Nevertheless, when I saw Mrs. Vindman whining on X about not getting one of those pardons, those preemptive pardons, the phrase, "You have received your reward in full," came to mind. Any theories or thoughts as to how Vindman was not given one?
Well, I don't know. Like, this is my whole theory about Ukraine and the reverse Wakanda. Like, how many people know exactly how deep the hole is, how dark the hole is, and you can't pardon. I mean, really, you at some point, even they have to turn off the spigot. I just think our reaction should be go after him, go after whoever's the closest thing you can get to being Fauci adjacent, because that's the next step in proving what a joke this is, to make sure that everybody around the people that were given pardons are so obviously guilty. Go get somebody.
It's pretty simple, I think. These are just communists. So he's a low-level
apparatchik.
Useful idiot.
Apparatchiks don't get pardons. Yeah.
He was an apparatchik.
We didn't send you to Siberia. You got your reward in full. Quit your bitching, basically.
In the Harry Potter books, Wormtail, he's an apparatchik of Voldemort. Played a crucial role in him coming back, but otherwise he wasn't that talented. There was nothing special about him. Voldemort thanked him for cutting off his own hand to bring back the Dark Lord by creating a magical hand for Wormtail that later strangled him. So I think that's what this is.
I think you're right on. He's just an apparatchik. Yeah. He's not in the Politburo. He's not a made man. So that's why the phrase "you have received your reward in full" came to mind.
Yeah, it's their worldview.
Yeah. You're not in the Sanhedrin, Judas. It's not about you.
You're not created in the image and likeness of God.
You've received your reward. What more do we owe you? We offered you. Hey, you were willing to trade in your valor and honor and integrity for a virtue signal, an attaboy, endless parade of fawning media appearances on our platforms and greater recognition from our people for your contribution in standing up to literally Hitler. You got your 30 pieces. What more did you? We honored our end of the agreement. You just apparently lack any self-awareness of understanding the true order of things here, right? Mm-hmm. It's just a straight up Caiaphas play. That's all. You're not in the group, man. So we honored it. You wanted something transactional, not about. We know you're not a true believer. We know you're just for sale. So we bought you. We're done with you. You're a whore. We're out. We're good. We pardoned all the true believers. We pardoned the party members. We pardoned the Politburo. But those of you that were just mere apparatchiks, we let you guys hang with us. We let you roll with us. We let you think you were one of the cool kids. So you got what you wanted. Yeah. Away with you.
It's a little Occam's razor right there.
Yes. Now, it also kind of tells you where Debbie Birx is at. Because as we heard, if you remember from Scott Atlas, that inside the White House, Birx essentially was running COVID policy within the White House itself. and that Fauci was just kind of off at NIH, NAID. Can't ever remember the abbreviation. Whatever the hell bureau he's. Thank you. Okay. He was over there and operating his own separate fiefdom and kingdom, as if he was basically, that's why we did the cover of Fauci and Bargain the way that we did it, because he was essentially operating a shadow government. He was acting as a de facto president to the other half of America. But within the White House in and of itself, the treachery was not led by Anthony Fauci, and that Anthony Fauci was actually not in the White House very often during that time period. Okay, that Birx was the omnipresent point person at all the COVID task force meetings. The one that Mike Pence, who was in charge of the task force, completely genuflected to on a daily basis, and whatever she said was literally, "Thus speaketh Zarathustra, the law." Okay, so similarly, she didn't get her pardon either. She's not a member. She's not a true believer. She's worked in plenty of Republican administrations in the past. Okay, so she performed her duty. Okay, and now she's on her own as well. So what I think ought to happen here is people like, we didn't even talk about this because this happened after we went for the weekend, but my buddy Ed Martin that we just had on the show, who took over Eagle Forum for the late great Phyllis Schlafly. He was originally appointed to be chief of staff of OMB. Well, he got an upgrade since since we talked to him. He's now going to be the U.S. District Attorney for Washington, D.C., guys. Do you know what that means?
I know what it can mean.
That can mean a lot of power. That can mean a lot of problems for people like Alexander Vindman and Debbie Birx. So they're under no protection. So I don't know what you guys think, but I'm kind of thinking commenso festival. Let's roll.
Well, like I said, my instinct, fine, you didn't get Fauci, get whoever was Fauci adjacent, make it clear. Now, with that specific example, is the thinking that, well, we didn't, she was in that White House so much that it's going to be really hard for them. I don't agree, but I understand why they might tactically think that it's going to be hard for Trump, much harder for them to go after Birx without coming out dirty themselves than to go after Fauci.
What do you think, Aaron?
Just make as many people who deserve it lives as uncomfortable as possible.
That's a good creed. Let's just go with that motto.
Yeah, let's not overthink
it. Yes, let's just go with that. If they traitors deserve to be just to suffer, and so let's give them what they deserve. Fair enough. All right, let's move on. Ken writes, so if I understand the current plan, we're going to invest $500 billion to build Skynet and a portal to another dimension in reference to the 1994 Stargate movie so that we can create robotic injections customized for everybody like some X-Files episode. Glad I watched a lot of sci-fi in the 90s. Pretty much it. I mean, Aaron mentioned Minority Report because he was a little kid in the 90s, but I loved X-Files. Never missed an episode. One of my all-time favorite shows. I can't tell you how many X-Files episodes written and directed by Chris Carter touched on several items that are in the news this week, 30 years ago. Okay. Stargate, the movie about ancient aliens and all that other kind of stuff too. Okay. So here's the dilemma with all of this. And again, you just have to understand that people cannot rise above their own worldview. Some of you think I'm saying that as an excuse. I don't mean it as an excuse. It's an observation. I'm not saying that to say agree with things you don't agree with. Change your principles. That's not the argument that I'm making. I'm not even making an argument. I'm making an observation. We were just having this conversation in another context during the last break. Human beings are not algorithms. They're complicated beings. And great people have blind spots and terrible people do great things. And we don't sometimes know motivations for why either one takes place. And people who have it all going on and live an entire life of of character and integrity, have a weak moment late in life, don't finish well, and it changes their reputation from that time forward. I mean, this is the impact of sin on the world. And so we have to, from a biblical worldview standpoint, folks, we have to incorporate the reality of sin in the world into our calculus. Because if you don't, you won't understand that human nature in and of itself is a limiting principle. It's a limiting principle. As the Joker said to Batman for many years in the comics I read growing up as a kid, you're just one bad day away from being where I am. Okay? I mentioned this speaking at Real Men earlier this week. At the moment, my show was growing 400%, and I'm probably doing the most important work in my career that I will ever do. My marriage was this close. I was this close to coming in and having to tell people, hey, I'm getting a divorce. We're not one-to-one entities. We're not a periodic table of moralities. We're not flowcharts. We're not formulas. Human nature is complicated. So here's the reality of the worldview of Donald Trump. The same impulses that have him saying, I'm going to take away the security details of all these people who were disloyal to me. And then I'll stand right there and tell the media when they say, aren't you afraid of something bad happening to them? Well, they're all rich. They can buy their own damn security. Not my fault. And the same impulses that lead him to go to a room full of sheikhs and terror cell funders in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia in May of 2017 and just lay down an ordinance to right there their faces. And the same impulses that have him say to Davos, you lost. In fact, it's not even worth it for me to even come talk to you in person anymore. You're lucky I'm here to grace you grace your presence by Zoom. Okay? You're not even worth dissing to your faces. That those same kinds of impulses are what make him think, well, this is the new frontier. It's going to happen inevitably, so we've got to be on the cutting edge and better at it than anybody else. Whether that's COVID vaccines, after you find out, hey, we're in a scamdemic and China's producing 85% of our antibiotics, well, we can't let them produce the vaccines, so we can't trust them with that either. Since we couldn't trust them with the origin of the virus, so we've got to do it and do it better than anybody. Same impulses. On some level, he might be like, I cannot imagine the rest of the world if we're like, guys, we're just completely just going to not do this AI thing. I'm sure Beijing will be like, you're right, we'll follow your lead. Probably not, guys. So this is where things get real complicated. What is the line between this is going to happen regardless of our participation level or not, to this is so immoral we cannot participate? There's clearly that line. There are clearly such moral lines. Slavery would be a moral line along those kinds of lines. Human trafficking would be a moral line across those kinds of lines. And here's the thing too, guys. These questions are going to be way more difficult to navigate in a post-Christian, godless society, because before we even start arguing over what we think God says we can and cannot do, we don't even agree really as a society en masse that there's a God who tells us what we can and cannot do, right? Okay? Mm-hmm. And so now we're not even having federalist and anti-federalist arguments now. I mean, now we don't even agree on the basic presuppositions that King George III is the bad guy here. We don't agree on much. And so I don't know the answer to this particular question. I am confident if we did nothing with it at all, I am confident all the nations that hate us would do everything with it they possibly could because of human nature. So that doesn't necessarily mean we do evil so good may come, right? We'll get to that later in Romans. Paul will address this. But I do think some of you guys want to live in a world that's never coming back. And I wonder if 120 years ago, you'd have been the folks that said, don't move into the city, stay on the farm. With the running water and the electricity, blah, blah, blah. Like you were going to somehow stymie that level of small e societal evolution. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, well, you alluded earlier in the week. There are two aspects that people were talking about the very broad aspect, along with the cameras, the Big Brother part of what's going on.
That's a Black
here.
Mirror episode for sure.
And then the specific one with the vaccines. Yeah, I said this could either be Star Trek First Contact, or it could be Terminator.
Correct.
Yes. But I will say, obviously, this kind of stuff can be used for nefarious purposes. My main concern is that technology increasingly becomes a great anesthetic, and it's not something that a robust Western civilization can just put on cruise control, and that's what it's done. Our men have become lazier and weaker.
You mean like technology for just technology's sake? Is that kind of what you're saying? Without wrestling with the meta of why, just because we can do a thing, should we do that thing?
I think there's one thing about there does feel like a certain inevitability to it. I don't disagree with that, but I do know that there's all kinds of people, including Christians, who think in terms like that. Well, it's obvious. It's like objectively better. Mm-hmm. It's your value. Your life is not objectively better now than it was 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago. That's not the God of history, and we think there's all kinds of Christians who think when they think about the reasons why they're the most lucky, they're like, I would have never wanted to live in that time of history. And it mostly has to do with reasons of comfort, when our standard is the cross. There's huge problems emotionally, psychologically, theologically with our scales and what we weigh and what we value, whether we're willing to admit it or not.
Aaron?
I think what concerns people about this conversation is really the misnomer of artificial intelligence, as if intelligence can be artificial. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So it sounds really scary.
It has to come from somewhere.
But it is a misnomer, because intelligence has to be, it's either real or it's not, sentient or it's not. And I don't think you're ever going to create a machine that is sentient. So it sounds very scary, but it's a misnomer for basically large language models and computers who've been taught to do extremely complicated tasks in very short amounts of times. That I'm sure if somebody's a real big expert on artificial AI, I'm sure that they could probably correct me in maybe even categorical ways. But that's I'm trying to boil this down. I think that's a lot of this, because there are some who are trying to use so-called artificial intelligence for, debate what you want to. You should have alarm bells going with the Larry Ellison, hey, we're going to use artificial intelligence to create bespoke vaccines for people suffering from cancer. That's a good motivation, regardless of the execution. But I think people just have a hard time with this because it sounds so scary or sounds so weird, and it's really just a misnomer for the next evolution of really complicated tasks that we're asking computers to do. Now, Todd's contention is right. Again, how are you actually using this new field of technology? That's always going to be the contention at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. I do think there are some people who have pushed artificial intelligence thinking that they can actually create a sentient, artificially man-made intelligence. They're fools. They're deluding themselves. I think that's probably out there. But most of this is just a new sticker name for really advanced computer tasks.
I'm trying to remember. I think that's well said. And Aaron will be too little to remember this. But mid-'90s, when the internet first went mainstream, right? You got the Netscape CD-ROM that you put into your.
I remember that.
You do remember that? Okay. Do you remember this level of hand-wringing about bringing the internet in every home, as there was about AI and what this would potentially open up in terms of privacy concerns and individual agency, autonomy, those kinds of things? Because I don't remember that.
There wasn't, but I think, I don't know if hand-wringing is the right way, but I mean, we weren't really wise as serpents, and we should have been.
I see. The reason I asked that is because I wonder, we weren't in an area yet where it was clearly manifest that the social compact in America was broken. Right. Okay. It's not the cameras that are bad. It's asking yourself, do you trust Larry Ellison or people like him to be the ones putting them in place and determining what it is they are and aren't going to film and how often? See, we're back to human nature. Worldview is destiny. We can't escape it. Dread it, run from it, destiny arrives all the same. It's not the device. It's the human and what the human will do with said device.
Okay, but in a post-Christian world, what's the value bet on which way this goes then?
On a post-Christian world, the value bet will go negative.
Yeah.
But it will also pretty much go negative on virtually everything.
Yeah.
On virtually everything, including the technology that pre-existed the fall of the culture in and of itself. It'll go against that too. Okay? Because there's no, when you're in a godless culture, there isn't any form of resistance, of systemic force pushing back on the human nature, saying we can do better than this. We have to do better than this. Living out Calvin's city within the city, okay? Or Augustine's city of God, living out something that is different and better than what is going on in the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Okay? If you don't have that, and you can have, by the way, Calvin's city within a city and Augustine's city of God in a godless culture, if there is, and for centuries, frankly, that's what we had to have, but we had that because we had a properly salty church. We had a prophetic church, or enough of it, that real catechesis and discipleship was happening, so there was some remnant of people that were known as different and distinct and from pushing back against whatever the spirit of the age was in their time. That is, we've got a double whammy right now. We don't have that. Okay? And that's why we're asking Donald Trump to be Pope, Cyrus, Nehemiah, Moses. All right, some composite amalgamation of all these, pre-incarnation, instruments and tools of righteousness in God's, kingdom. So, we're kind of asking him to be and to a lesser degree, the guy in Florida, the exact same thing. Okay, because we don't have an institutional church right now that if Ron DeSantis, ask yourself this question. If Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump did not exist, or a few other people like them, where would the collective resistance from the spirit of the age come from? We don't know. Here's what we do know. There is a God, and he is sovereign. So he would call one up. One would make manifest and emerge, right? Okay. But the fact we have all these churches and everything, and we don't know means it would have to be something we currently cannot foresee. Like you would not have foreseen a Donald Trump 10 years ago being this person that he is now. You see what I'm saying? That is indicative of the state of the church and the culture. And so what that means, therefore, since there is no systemic discipleship and catechesis going on, the worldview is broken. And that means there isn't a centralized force that is present in America to push back on these sorts of things if indeed they go off the rails. The best we can do. Here is the best we can do. The best we can do is Donald Trump gives Larry Ellison $500 billion to make America the AI capital of the world and says to RFK Jr. and Jay Bhattacharya and Marty Makary and Dr. Weldon, you guys run the agencies and play referee to make sure they don't do what they did before with Project or Operation Warp Speed. That's your job. That's the best we can do. The best we can do is play these kinds of interest off of one another. But the idea of offering a righteous alternative is not possible without the Holy Spirit of God. It simply is not.
Well, within all that, there's a tacit acknowledgement that we just aren't a republic anymore.
Correct.
And we don't want to be.
Correct.
And we're not interested in. And that's what I'll always...
The minute you need red Caesars means you're not a republic anymore. You can't govern yourselves anymore. Correct.
That's what I'll always point out, and I always resent the hell out of Aaron in your montage pointing out the Davos anonymity thing. Like, there's a paradox here, and I wish we could have if I ever have drinks with Auron, I want to dive deep because we're slightly on the opposite side about this thing. I don't like Vivek, and I think we must have a robust H1N1.
B1, you mean, not
H1.
You don't want H1N1.
Yes,
You meant B1, yeah.
Is kind of lazy, but I think it's also lazy not to acknowledge we don't have a robust American manhood who wants to grab the reins of things. Mm-hmm. Also, when we whine about anonymity, I would never make anonymity illegal, but I will say you have way more big brother instincts if you have a group of if they know they're confronting a group of manhood that will race and hide behind anonymity, will not show up to the school board meetings. These are the acts of a republic. Men who stand up and say, yeah, I gave you that authority.
Yep.
And here's the line. Right now, everything you just said, Steve, I think is incredibly honest. But the most honest assessment is that we gave them all our power and we don't want it anymore.
Correct.
That's weak. That's pathetic. If you feel like you're a victim of that, you did it to yourself because this nation was not planted that way.
I mean, go back to the 14th Amendment conversation Auron and I were having last hour. If we could bring Jacob Howard, we could go back to the 1860s and bring Jacob Howard forward 150 years, okay? He would look at us and he would say, I literally wrote in the amendment, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, guys.
Yes.
Idiots, morons, dip bleeps. It says it in the first sentence of the amendment. Okay? You mean to tell me you took that and you guys for 50 years acted as if it meant anybody, an enemy of the United States, an enemy combatant could come here, all right, with a concubine, with a mistress, knock her up, and drop the kid on our soil, and now the kid's a citizen with full rights therein? That's what he would say to us.
Yeah.
So Auron is correct. From our understanding of the dilemmas we face now, it is a sloppily written amendment. From the standard of the late 1860s, it's pretty damn clear.
Yeah.
From the subject to the jurisdiction thereof is pretty clear. And then you know what they meant by the way they went out and practiced it after it was ratified, right? They didn't give the children of ambassadors and foreign dignitaries instant citizenship status. So we know what they meant. It's just, and we quote it so often on our show over the years. This is the John Adams thing, only for a moral and religious people. Once we give up that line of divine accountability and responsibility, then we will make ourselves gods and we will reinterpret things as we want them to be, and our own narratives. If something will always rule, someone will always be worshipped. Okay, that's inescapable, right? And so again, the problem is us. The problem is us. More in a moment. All right, back here on the Steve Deace Show, of course, the March for Life coming up this weekend. Great opportunity to be reminded about our friends over at Preborn, an outstanding pro-life ministry we are proud to have partnered with here on the Blaze for the last few years. And that partnership, we estimate, has probably saved tens of thousands of babies. Over the course of its ministry, Preborn has saved hundreds of thousands. How do they do it? They use the biblical model of persuasion, truth and grace. And truth requires a confrontation, and a mom is confronted. If she's considering the murder of her child, she is confronted, albeit gently, but confronted nevertheless with an ultrasound that shows her and her conscience, hey, can you hear that heartbeat? That's not yours. That's a second heartbeat. That's somebody else's. And then hopefully mom chooses life. When she does that, she's now turned from the darkness to the light, and now is when the grace is offered. And there's tons of support that both the mom and the baby get, postnatal care, stuff as practical as car seats, and all of it's free of charge, even though none of this is free. But for as little as $28, you could fund an ultrasound today that will save a life. Make a tax-deductible donation today. I know so many of you have been so generous. Let's keep it going with our friends at Preborn. Just go to preborn.com/Steve. That's preborn.com/Steve. Again, that's preborn.com/Steve. All right, let's continue on here on a Feedback Friday. Clifford writes, it was a pleasure to meet both you and Daniel at Patriot Academy back in November. Thank you, brother. I've long admired you guys' commitment to truth and your abilities to tackle the critical issues facing our nation. I wanted to ask if you guys would consider using your influence with people like Chip Roy. All right, so I'm reading this online, guys, because I want you to tell me, Todd and Aaron, if you think this is worthy of me pinging Chip and other people I know who could maybe make something like this happen. All right. I wanted to ask if you would consider using your influence with people like Chip Roy to push for a committee to investigate and address the weaponization of false allegations during nominations. This problem has been undermining our system for decades, from Bork to Clarence Thomas to the enraging spectacle of the Kavanaugh hearings. A committee could explore increasing penalties for false witnesses and deterring these destructive tactics that erode public trust and justice. Your combined voices and platforms could be instrumental in shining a much-needed light on this issue and driving meaningful reform. Thanks to you guys for all you do to fight for what is right. What do you think?
No.
You don't think so?
No.
Why?
This is the same conversation that we just got done having before the break. The reason a committee like this would be necessary is because we're not serious about being a citizen.
Yeah.
We fall for these lies. We fall for these bananas in the tailpipes over and over and over again. They keep giving us bananas in the tailpipe because they know that we'll take them. Now, that is less true, I think, in the last few years than it has been my entire life and parts of your adult lives, guys. But again, we wouldn't fall for that. We wouldn't fall for that stupid stuff if we were actually engaged, stepping up to the plate as citizens as we needed to be.
All right. Can I redirect back to you for a second, Aaron?
Go ahead.
Do I hear you saying, hey, we have mechanisms for this?
Yes.
They lied under oath, refer them to the Department of Justice and have them prosecuted.
Make examples.
Creating another entity wouldn't in your mind doesn't account for the human nature aspect of it.
Listen,
it's just another entity.
Accountability is always a good thing. Like real accountability. Make an example out of somebody. Do you think the Julie Swetnicks of the world are more inclined or less inclined to lie, to just make stuff up on MSNBC if they see somebody trying to do the same thing get put in prison for doing that? They are less likely. Does that mean that they are a better citizen? By hook or by crook, yeah. And I think that's an example for the rest of the country as well.
You want to
make examples out of people.
Okay, you want to chime in on this, Todd?
If we only had laws against slander, well,
yes.
No, we do have laws against slander. I tried vis-a-vis my situation in the Carlisle School District. Here's an area where this is a gigantic problem, not in the where you're talking about. Because everybody there has resources and money. It's when the people that exist that do nothing but play with other people's money, government, treat individual citizens the way that they do, knowing full well that an individual citizen has to move heaven and earth financially just to even attempt to be on equal footing. That needs to be, but if you're not, it needs to be addressed more than what you're talking about. But again, the public locally, you don't need to wait for the federal government to take over your school board. You don't need to wait for the federal government to make sure your public prosecutors and your sheriffs are held accountable. It's right there in your own backyard, and you don't even show the appetite for that. You're never going to get that at the federal level.
I mean, didn't Jim Jordan chair a government weaponization committee? Do you guys know what it did? What it accomplished? Do you have any idea?
Sound bites, press releases.
Yeah. Listen, Clifford has the exact right instinct, no question about it. But we do have an entire bureaucracy called the Department of Justice, and that is its job. Now, obviously, with Merrick Garland, it wasn't going to prosecute those people because those people are part of the operation that Clifford and the rest of us are upset about, right? But we have a new Attorney General coming in, and Pam Bondi, whenever they get around to her confirmation. I mean, I don't know what the statute of limitations happens to be on lying under oath like Julie Swetnick or some of these other people did, but I certainly would love to find out, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Just remember, this is politics. And yes, and there's always been the mudslinging aspect of that. But right now, brother, you're asking for a people who didn't give a damn in red states across this entire nation while school districts trans their kids and hospitals did this. they were passive in the face of that. And you think there's an appetite to step up and have politicians not call each other? Come on, there's just no. The game's on. This is why I think the sunlight of the last 96 hours feels impossible, because from the perspective of a Republican citizenry, it has been for a long time. Trump is just doing stuff that really we should have never let happen.
Here's the thing that I think is important to understand about what you just said too. The stuff he's doing is in reaction to either what happened to him the last 4 years or the lessons he learned from losing and the fallout of that 4 years ago.
Yes.
You could really have a debate whether a second Trump, if he had won in 2020, if that second term would have looked anything in 4 years like what the first 4 days of this Trump second term have looked like.
I don't think it's even a debate. It wouldn't.
I mean, do you think that Trump, after being passive by and large in the face of COVID and Fauciism and everything for years, going to come in the next January, get rid of Jared Kushner and all the and he's going to get a better vice president and then Mike? You think he's going to do all that? I don't think so. Because none of that energy was demonstrated during the pivotal year of 2020, which is what put him in a position to lose in the first place. And I think not just that he lost, but then the cost of that loss to him personally, that they tried to put him in prison and everything else. I absolutely believe that it provoked and instilled in him a desire to understand how this process and system works at a level he truly was never engaged upon before. He was the guy that knew what all the lower chyrons on all the cable news networks said. So he was generally pretty well informed, right? But it was a mile wide and just a few inches deep. This guy's doing conversations with Joe Rogan for 3 hours on wind turbines and the Delta smelt fish and everything else. Okay, this guy did not exist before. This guy has responded to what they tried to do to him. And I think you could make a case that the first 4 days of this Trump 2.0, for all the suffering he went through and all of us went through the last 4 years, is better than the entire 4 years of Trump 2.0 would have been coming off the heels of COVID.
It's nothing short of miraculous, because this is the other way. This is 1A and 1B of how, when people say he was saved by God, Auron did.
That's
today.
That's another factor. He totally changed his campaign strategy after that. He got more relatable. Again, this is, you know what? We end our show every day with the scripture, Romans 8:28. All things work together for the glory of God, and those who love him are called according to his purposes. That's what it means to have a sovereign God. That what we mean for evil, Joseph's brothers throwing him into slavery. What they meant for evil. If they had not done that, though, God used that chain of events to move Joseph into the place that he would ultimately save not just his brothers, but an entire nation.
So, yeah.
And there's multiple examples of that in the scriptures.
We are going to have to get it into our heads. And this is a macro observation with micro granular application. We are going to have to get used to one thing. And we've said this often on this show. America is the exception of history, not the rule. The America that was founded is the exception, not the rule. We may be reverting back to the time in this country that looks like the vast majority of history. Does that mean that good cannot happen? No. Does that mean evil could flourish? Yes. And here's the granular application. We have to get used to doing the most good we possibly can with the time that God has given us. We have to redeem the time. We have to hope for the best for people who don't hate us, at the very least, or people who kind of like us in positions of power, to do the most good with the time that they have in power.
That's important.
And this, because what we just witnessed, what you guys just talked about there, you could have not possibly predicted this a year ago. A year ago. Don't tell me. I've been more vicious towards Donald Trump on X and on this show, maybe more than anybody else on this show, publicly. Again, a year ago. That was a year ago. For me to be a cheerleader now, I would have never predicted that. Even though I was more vicious, I was actually more I guess more deferential to him. I thought it would kind of be if he actually was able to be reelected. I didn't think that was possible. If it was, I thought it would kind of be a redux of his first term. Get some good things, get some bad things. I could not have predicted this. So again, God works in ways that we just cannot foresee. Absolutely. So do the best you can. Do the most good you can. Because there are so many things that are completely out of our control. I think you have to get that through your head.
That's the distinction you drew there is vital for people to understand. God is sovereign and we are not. All right? So losing on purpose in order to have a better outcome later, we can't orchestrate events to make things like that happen, folks. That's why we always have to ask ourselves, what's the most righteous thing I can do? What's the most good in any situation that I can do? Okay? And that doesn't mean, by the way, that means we always have to make choices that conform to the options a fallen world gives us. It does, however, it will mean that more times than not, however. Otherwise, otherwise, because there's so much evil that there's a lot of obvious good we could be doing. I mean, the people that didn't want to vote for Trump in the last election, how many of those people were showing up at all the school board meetings you're talking about? How many of them said, hey, this guy's too immoral. I can't trust him again after how he ruined it the last time. So what I'm going to do is I'm investing in all my school board meetings and I'm running for state. No, they stayed on Twitter all day to remind us all how self-righteous they were. That's not doing good. That's not being principled. It's not. More times than not, you are going to have to settle for what is the best you can do in a fallen world. Did I say every time? No. There are moments to Bonhoeffer something where there is no good being offered at all. There's not a good option here. And the spirit of the age is all encompassing in a culture. That's why we have martyrs. But usually you don't get to that point till the point of martyrdom is usually at the point when a culture is that dark. We had real persecution going on, but Trump pardoned, what was it, 21 people yesterday?
23.
23? None of them were on death row. None of them were going to the gallows or hanging. I don't say that to reduce any of their persecution, because they didn't deserve any of it. But that's how you know when the culture is at the point that all the options before you are bad and it's time to just sit here and polycarp the thing. We're not close to anything like that. Let me tell you how you get there. When you refuse to the opportunities to do as much good as you can do, that's how you get there. You create a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're not God. You cannot orchestrate events that are seemingly random and dark and use them to bring your righteousness and goodness to light. You're not God. You're not. And that is every bit as demonic and ye be like God as how many genders are there? Well, I think today there's 56. You're not master of reality. None of us are. So we do as much good as we can do. And then in the end, you trust that a God that not even spares his own son on our behalf will honor Romans 8:28. And it may not always look the way we want it to look. It is fascinating in just the limited glimpses we get as human beings to sit back and see how God knows how to tell a story, man. I mean, he knows how to weave a plot. It is truly something to behold. If you wait, if you have faith, and what your ancestors used to call hindsight, the benefit of it, and to see there's no way we could have orchestrated these things and made them happen, even if we tried and we sat in a writer's room with the most creative people we had and said, this is the plan. We couldn't have even orchestrated, even if we could come up with it, which we can't. And then we couldn't have orchestrated anyway, even if we could.
I just posted this on X, and make no mistake, I mean, communists never sleep. They never stop. But it sure seems like the exact moment that Donald Trump has hit his stride and then some, living up is the moment that they are spent over there.
They're out of talking points and ideas.
You can't engineer this.
Right.
And it's not even Donald.
Hold on a second. I got to talk about our friends over at Patriot Mobile real quick. Otherwise, they'll get mad at me. All right. And they deserve to be talked about because you want to talk about getting ahead and being on the cutting edge. They've been on the cutting edge of the parallel economy for way longer than most of us even knew what it was. So make the switch today to a company who takes the profits that you give them and reinvest them back into the country that you love. I saw this last year. I did 3 different conference speaking engagements around the country last year, and all 3 of them had Patriot Mobile as a sponsor. They have a great service. It's what we use in our family, what I've got on my phone right now. You make the switch today. You can keep your number, switch your number, keep your phone, upgrade your phone, and they'll get you started with a free month of service today if you use my name, Steve, as your promo code at patriotmobile.com/Steve. patriotmobile.com/Steve. Use the promo code Steve for the free month of service to get started. Promo code Steve at patriotmobile.com/Steve. Todd.
We're really watching A Christmas Story and Ebenezer Scrooge. I mean, Trump was not interested or capable not very long ago of doing this. Now we saw it happen. I mean, for the last 72 hours, he's like, God bless everyone. He's throwing turkeys out the window. And now we have a decision to make. We can sit there and say that, man, God's doing a marvelous work, or we can say nothing good's from Nazareth. And there's a lot of people on the right who simply, as Aaron said, they don't want to take anyone of any kind because it's coming from him.
Right. Except, here's the thing to remember. All good things come from where?
God.
They all come from God. Have a great weekend, Romans 8:28.